In the quiet hum of the city's forgotten edges, where asphalt gave way to cracked concrete and ambition was a foreign currency, Elias Vance's world was forged in steel and measured in millimeters. His kingdom was a small two-bay garage, its air thick with the scent of motor oil, hot metal, and the faint, sweet perfume of the jasmine vine his late wife had planted by the door. His hands, perpetually mapped with the dark lines of grease, were instruments of profound understanding. They could read the secret language of a sputtering engine, diagnose the ailment of a misaligned chassis, and coax life back into machines others had abandoned. He was a mechanic, a title as humble and honest as the worn leather of his tool belt. But within that simple definition lay a universe of complexity, a past he had deliberately buried under the weight of routine and the quiet responsibility of raising his daughter. Lily, his 7-year-old sunbeam, was the true engine of his life. She would sit on an overturned crate, her small legs swinging, a sketchbook open on her lap, filling pages with colorful, fantastical machines while her father worked. Her crayon drawings of flying cars and rocket ships were taped to the inside of his primary toolbox, a gallery of innocent genius that reminded him of a world he once knew. A world of polished labs, impossible equations, and the soaring promise of the sky. He had left that world for her, to give her a life of peace, of substance, of a father who was present not just in body, but in soul. Miles away, in a tower of glass and chrome that pierced the clouds, Isabella Sterling inhabited a world of calculated precision. Her office, a minimalist expanse of white marble and panoramic views, was less a workspace and more a throne room. From here, she commanded Sterling Dynamics, a titan of advanced engineering and aerospace technology. Her hands, always perfectly manicured, signed contracts worth billions, gestured with authority in boardrooms, and scrolled through data streams that dictated the future of flight. She saw the world as a system to be optimized, a series of problems awaiting elegant, profitable solutions. Emotions were inefficient variables, personal connections a potential liability. Her heart was a fortress, protected by the high walls of success and the cold, clear logic of the bottom line. She was a CEO, a title as powerful and isolating as the rarefied air she breathed. The collision of these two worlds was not a matter of chance, but of physics. An object of immense value and complexity, when pushed beyond its limits, will inevitably fail. Isabella's object was the Sterling Ethel, a one-of-a-kind hypercar she had commissioned as the ultimate symbol of her company's prowess. It was not merely a car. It was a statement. Its engine, a revolutionary hybrid of electric and a proprietary alloy turbine, was a masterpiece of engineering, a silent, screaming testament to her dominance. And on a sun-drenched Tuesday, on a stretch of road far from the gleaming dealerships and specialized service centers that usually catered to her, it died. There was no dramatic explosion, no plume of smoke, just a sudden, sickening silence. The digital dashboard went dark, the turbine's whine faded to nothing, and the Ethel, a $2 million monument to progress, coasted to a graceless halt. It stopped less than 100 yards from a small, unassuming sign that read, Vance's Auto Repair. If it has an engine, we can talk to it. Isabella's own elite engineering team, summoned by helicopter, descended upon the vehicle like a Formula One pit crew. For 3 hours they worked, their state-of-the-art diagnostic tablets connecting to the car's neural network, their faces growing longer with every failed reboot. They were the best minds Sterling Dynamics had to offer, yet they were utterly baffled. The machine was a black box, its heart of fire and lightning refusing to speak to them. Frustrated, humiliated, and losing patience, Isabella's gaze fell upon the humble garage. It was an insult to even consider it. But the tow truck was 2 hours away, and the thought of her masterpiece being hauled away like common scrap was unbearable. She strode toward the garage, her sharp heels clicking an angry rhythm on the pavement. She found Elias leaning over the open hood of a vintage pickup, his brow furrowed in concentration. Lily sat nearby, meticulously coloring a purple dragon with silver wings. "Excuse me." Isabella's voice was sharp, cutting through the garage's peaceful hum. Elias straightened up, wiping his hands on an already stained rag. He looked at her, his eyes calm and assessing. He saw the expensive suit, the frustrated set of her jaw, the aura of immense, frustrated power. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice even and low. "My car has broken down," she stated, gesturing vaguely back toward the road. "My engineers, the best in the world, are unable to restart it." "I am told you are a mechanic," she said the word mechanic, as if it were a quaint, archaic term for a village blacksmith. Elias glanced past her at the sleek, alien form of the Ethel, surrounded by men in sterile white coveralls. He could feel the machine's silence from here. "Looks like more than a car," he observed. "It is the most advanced vehicle on the planet," she said, a note of pride warring with her anger. "Its systems are complex. Everything's complex until you find the simple thing that's wrong," he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. Isabella's patience snapped. The folksy wisdom was infuriating. "Listen, I don't have time for philosophy. Can you fix it or not? I will pay you $10,000 if you can get it started in the next hour." The men in white coveralls exchanged incredulous looks. One of them, her chief engineer, approached her. "Ms. Sterling, with all due respect, that's impossible. We've run every diagnostic. The core power coupling is offline, and the system is in total lockdown. We need to transport it back to the lab. This man, he has wrenches." The condescension hung in the air. Isabella looked at Elias, at his grease-stained hands and simple tools, and a cynical, mocking laugh escaped her lips. It was a short, sharp sound, utterly devoid of humor. "He's right. This is ridiculous. What could you possibly do with a wrench and a screwdriver that my team can't do with a direct mainframe link?" Elias didn't flinch. His gaze was steady. He looked from her cold, challenging eyes to the silent, beautiful machine on the road. He saw not a status symbol but a puzzle, a beautifully complicated puzzle that was hurting. He then looked at Lily, who was watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He was her hero, the man who could fix anything. He turned back to Isabella. "I'll do it for 500, he said calmly. "And I don't need an hour." That quiet confidence, that utter lack of intimidation in the face of her wealth and power, was the most unexpected thing she had encountered all day. It was a gauntlet thrown down, not with arrogance, but with a deep, unshakable certainty. She had laughed at him. He had simply ignored it. And now, she realized, she had no other choice but to see what he could do. The story of what happened next would be told in hushed, reverent tones in the highest echelons of automotive engineering for years to come. Isabella Sterling stood with her arms crossed, a portrait of skeptical impatience, as Elias Vance approached the dead hypercar. Her team of engineers parted before him, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. They saw a relic from a bygone era, a man with oil under his fingernails about to lay his primitive hands on their technological marvel. They saw a fool. Isabella, despite her grudging decision to let him try, saw the same. Elias, however, saw none of them. His focus narrowed until the entire world consisted only of him and the silent machine. He didn't reach for a diagnostic tablet or a power tool. Instead, he simply walked a slow circle around the Ethel, his calloused fingertips trailing lightly along its carbon fiber body. He was listening, not with his ears, but with a deeper, more profound sense of perception honed over a lifetime of communion with machines. He placed a hand on the hood, right over the turbine housing, and closed his eyes. One of Isabella's engineers stifled a snort. "Is he divining for faults?" he whispered to a colleague. Isabella's jaw tightened. She was beginning to feel the deep blush of public embarrassment. This was a sideshow, a pathetic detour on a terrible day. Elias opened his eyes. He seemed to have heard what he needed to. He walked back to his garage, ignoring the bewildered stares, and returned not with a complex array of equipment, but with three simple things: a standard mechanic stethoscope, a small, weighted tuning fork, and a single, custom-forged wrench from his personal toolbox. What is he planning to do? Isabella muttered to her chief engineer, a man named Harris. Perform an exorcism, perhaps? Harris replied dryly, his arms folded in a mirror of her own posture. Miss Sterling, this is a waste of time. The issue is a cascade failure in the primary energy distribution node. It's a sealed unit. It can't be serviced here. Elias paid them no mind. He popped the vehicle's engine cover, revealing the impossibly intricate heart of the Ethel. It was a surgeon's view of a mechanical god, gleaming alloys, shielded conduits, and crystalline heat sinks, all packed with surgical precision. It was designed to be impenetrable, a perfect system. But Elias knew there was no such thing as a perfect system. He placed the bell of the stethoscope against a specific junction box, a place none of her team had paid any attention to. He tapped the tuning fork against his knuckle, and as it hummed with a pure, clear note, he touched its base to the stethoscope. He closed his eyes again, his head tilted, listening intently to the resonance traveling through the machine's metal skeleton. For a full minute he was perfectly still. The silence on the roadside was absolute, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Lily watched from the garage doorway, her face a mask of serene confidence in her father. To her, this was normal. This was how Daddy talked to things that were broken. Finally, Elias opened his eyes. A flicker of understanding, of recognition, passed through them. It's not a cascade failure, he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the still air. It's starving. Harris stepped forward, unable to contain his disbelief. Starving? What are you talking about? The fuel cells are at 98% capacity and the battery is fully charged. We verified that. You checked the supply? Elias countered, not looking at him. You didn't check the flow. The energy is there, but it's not getting through. He pointed with the end of his wrench to a tiny, almost invisible component buried deep within the engine assembly. The microactuator on the plasma injector valve. It's seized. Impossible, Harris shot back instantly. That actuator is forged from a solid-state memory alloy. It has no moving parts in the traditional sense. It can't seize. It's rated for 1,000,000 cycles under extreme temperature and pressure. It's not broken, Elias clarified patiently. It's just stuck. There's a harmonic dissonance. The resonant frequency from the electric motor is creating a counter-vibration that's putting the alloy into a state of nodal lock. It happens sometimes when you try to marry two powerful systems that speak different languages. He looked up and met Isabella's gaze for the first time since he'd begun. Your car has a stutter. The simplicity of the diagnosis was, to Isabella's engineers, the most profound insult of all. Harmonic dissonance? A stutter? It sounded like mystical nonsense, not engineering. Isabella, however, felt a strange chill. The way he spoke calmly, authoritatively about resonant frequencies and system languages. It was the lexicon of a high-level physicist, not a roadside mechanic. Before anyone could argue further, Elias acted. He took his custom wrench, a tool that looked ancient but was perfectly balanced, and angled it deep into the engine bay, a feat of dexterity that should have been impossible without dismantling half the components. He didn't try to turn a bolt or loosen a fitting. He found a specific point on the chassis frame, a structural support beam several inches away from the actuator itself. He tapped it, once, twice. The sound was not a metallic clang, but a dull, precise thud, like a chiropractor making a minute adjustment. He had not fixed the part. He had retuned the entire system around it. He had sent a targeted vibration through the frame, a counterfrequency to cancel the dissonance and release the nodal lock on the memory alloy. He withdrew the wrench and stepped back. Try it now, he said. There was a moment of stunned silence. Harris looked at Isabella, awaiting her command to dismiss the madman. But Isabella just stared at Elias, her mind racing. Do it, she commanded Harris, her voice barely a whisper. Harris, looking deeply offended, walked to the driver's door and slid inside. He pressed the ignition button on the console, his movements exaggerated to show the futility of the act. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a low hum began to build. A soft blue light pulsed from the engine compartment. With a smooth, breathtaking whoosh, the turbine spooled to life. The dashboard lit up, displaying a sea of green, operational icons. The Sterling Ethel was alive. It purred with the sound of immense, perfectly controlled power. The jaws of Isabella's entire engineering team dropped in unison. They stared, slack-jawed, from the humming engine to the grease-stained man who had healed it with 2 taps from a wrench. They had used supercomputers. He had used a tuning fork. Isabella felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The laugh she had directed at this man an hour ago now echoed in her own ears, a sound of profound, world-class arrogance. He had done the impossible, and he had done it with an elegance and an insight that her entire billion-dollar research and development division had failed to produce. Elias simply nodded, as if this outcome were the only one he had ever expected. He walked back to his toolbox, wiping the wrench clean with a soft cloth. Isabella, her composure shattered, walked over to him on unsteady legs. She pulled out her checkbook, her hands trembling slightly. She wrote a check not for $500, not for the $10,000 she had offered in mockery, but for $50,000. She held it out to him. I don't understand, she said, her voice strained. Elias looked at the check, then back at her. He gently pushed her hand away. $500 is what we agreed on, he said. The job is done. He turned and walked over to Lily, who ran to him and wrapped her arms around his leg. See, sweetie? It just needed a little help remembering how to sing. He never looked back at the car or the money. He just looked at his daughter. Isabella stood there, holding the check, feeling for the first time in her life utterly and completely insignificant. The mechanic hadn't just fixed her car. He had dismantled her entire worldview. The next morning, Isabella Sterling sat in her sterile office, the silence broken only by the soft chime of her private line. The Ethel was parked in her executive garage, its engine purring flawlessly. Her engineers had spent the night running diagnostics, their reports littering her desk. The consensus was dumbfounding. The mechanic had been right. A previously undocumented resonant frequency conflict. Their models hadn't predicted it because it was a 1 in a billion anomaly, a ghost in the perfect machine. A ghost he had found with a stethoscope. She was staring at a preliminary background check on Elias Vance, address, vehicle registration, no criminal record, a widower. It was all maddeningly, frustratingly normal. It explained nothing. Then the call came. The caller ID was blocked, but her assistant patched it through immediately. Ms. Sterling, it's Dr. Alistair Finch. Isabella sat bolt upright. Dr. Finch was the legendary semi-retired head of engineering for the Italian firm that had co-developed the Ethel's turbine. He was a titan, a man whose name was spoken with the same reverence as Enzo Ferrari or Ferdinand Porsche. Dr. Finch, she said, her voice regaining its usual professional composure. This is a surprise. Isabella, I will be brief. His voice, a gravelly Italian baritone, crackled with excitement. We have been monitoring the telemetry from your Ethel. We saw the shutdown yesterday. We saw the unorthodox reboot sequence. There was a pause. We have spent the last 12 hours with a team of 50 engineers trying to understand what happened. We have analyzed the vibrational data signature from the moment of restart. Isabella, what your mechanic did was not a repair. It was a symphony. Isabella was silent, gripping her phone. This problem, this nodal lock, we have seen it once before in a prototype jet engine. Caused a catastrophic failure. We spent $200 million and 6 months trying to solve it and failed. We had to abandon the design. This man, your mechanic, he diagnosed it in minutes and solved it with a targeted percussive recalibration. He didn't just fix the car, my dear. He solved a problem that has baffled the greatest minds in my field for years. Alistair Finch took a breath. I have only one question for you, Isabella. Who is he? We must find him. A man with this level of intuitive diagnostic skill is not a mechanic. He is a maestro. He is a genius. The word hung in the air long after the call ended. Genius. Isabella's fingers flew across her keyboard, authorizing a deep-level background investigation into Elias Vance, sparing no expense. She needed to know who he was, not out of curiosity, but out of a terrifying, dawning realization that he represented a level of understanding she couldn't buy, she couldn't command, and she couldn't comprehend. The report came back in hours, and it was like reading the file of a ghost. For 10 years, from age 22 to 32, Elias Vance had been a phantom. His academic records were sealed under a federal non-disclosure agreement. His employment history was a string of redacted entries at classified aerospace projects. But the investigator had found a loophole, an old, unredacted press release from a university. It was a list of award recipients for the prestigious Zenith Prize for Theoretical Propulsion. And there, 10 years ago, was the winner, Elias Vance, a prodigy who had redefined the principles of magnetohydrodynamics before he was old enough to rent a car. The final piece of the puzzle was a heavily censored incident report from a project codenamed Icarus. It was a next-generation suborbital vehicle. There had been a catastrophic failure during an unmanned test flight. The official report cited unforeseeable structural resonance, but the file contained a single, chilling footnote. A dissenting opinion from the project's lead engineer, a young man who claimed the failure was due to a subcontractor using a substandard composite material to cut costs. He alleged a cover-up. That engineer's name was Elias Vance. Shortly after, he had vanished from the industry completely. His wife, a fellow engineer on the project, had been killed in a car accident just weeks later, an accident many whispered was not an accident at all. Isabella leaned back in her chair, the cold leather chilling her skin. It all clicked into place. The tragedy, the cover-up, the retreat from a world that had betrayed him. He wasn't hiding from failure. He was hiding from a success so profound it had become dangerous. He had traded a world of lies in the sky for a world of truth on the ground. She knew she had to see him again, not as a CEO hiring a consultant, but as someone who had stumbled upon a great, hidden truth. She drove herself not in the Ethel but in a standard, unassuming sedan. She found him in the garage, this time not working on a car, but sitting on the floor with Lily, patiently helping her assemble a complex Lego model of a spaceship. The scene was so peaceful, so achingly normal, it felt like a sacred space. "Mr. Vance," she said from the doorway. Her voice was softer now, stripped of its usual authority. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Lily, however, beamed at her. "It's the shiny car lady," she exclaimed. Isabella felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't experienced in years. She smiled, a genuine, uncalculated smile. "Hello, Lily." She looked at Elias. "I know who you are. I read about Project Icarus." Elias's calm demeanor fractured for just a second. A shadow of old pain passed through his eyes. He stood up slowly. "That was a long time ago. They said the failure was unforeseeable," Isabella pressed gently. "But you foresaw it, didn't you? You warned them." "Seeing something and being heard are two different things," he said, his voice low and tight. "Some people value profits more than physics. Physics always wins in the end." He looked down at Lily. "I lost everything because of that lesson. I won't lose what I have left." The air was thick with unspoken grief. Isabella felt a sudden, sharp pang of empathy. Her own life, so full of acquisitions and victories, felt hollow in comparison to the profound, protective love this man had for his child. "I'm not here to drag you back into that world," she said, her voice earnest. "But I need your help." She explained the situation at Sterling Dynamics. Her company was the lead contender for the new government contract for an advanced unmanned surveillance drone, the Argus, but the prototypes were failing. 2 had crashed in the last month during tests, suffering from inexplicable catastrophic system failures. Her engineers were blaming a software glitch, but the fixes weren't working. The final demonstration was in 2 weeks. If the third and final prototype failed, Sterling Dynamics would face financial ruin, and her chief competitor, Thorn Industries, would win the contract by default. "The failure reports," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "They read just like the initial reports from Icarus. My team calls it a ghost in the machine. They can't find it." Elias listened, his expression growing more intense with every word. He recognized the pattern. The language of the failure was familiar to him, a dialect of disaster he knew all too well. "And your competitor?" he asked quietly. "Thorne Industries. Who runs it?" "Marcus Thorne," Isabella replied, a note of bitterness in her voice. "We were once engaged." The final piece clicked into place for Elias. This wasn't a technical problem. This was sabotage. It was a story he had lived through before. A story of greed, ambition, and a complete disregard for the consequences. He looked at Isabella, truly looked at her, and saw past the CEO. He saw a woman fighting for her company, for her legacy, trapped in the same kind of corporate treachery that had destroyed his own life. And in that moment, she was not a billionaire client, but an ally. He then looked at Lily, who had finished her Lego spaceship. She held it up for him to see. "Look, Daddy, it can fly to the stars." His decision was made. He would not let another good design, another dream of flight, be destroyed by the Marcus Thornes of the world. He would not do it for the money or for sterling dynamics. He would do it because it was the right thing to do, and because, deep down, the part of him that dreamed of the stars had never truly died. "All right, Miss Sterling," he said, the old fire of the Zenith Prize winner returning to his eyes. "Show me your ghost. I've seen this one before." The alliance was forged not over a contract in a boardroom, but in the quiet, oil-scented air of the garage, witnessed only by a 7-year-old girl and her Lego spaceship. Isabella offered Elias an exorbitant consulting fee. He refused it. Instead, he made a simple counteroffer. "If I help you, you will fund a full engineering scholarship every year in my wife's name. And the first recipient will be chosen based on integrity, not just grades." Isabella agreed without a moment's hesitation. It was the easiest negotiation of her life. The next day, Elias Vance walked into the pristine, high-security research and development lab at Sterling Dynamics. He wore his usual work jeans and a simple shirt, carrying only a small, worn leather satchel. He was an analog man in a digital cathedral. Isabella's top engineers, including Harris, watched him with a mixture of awe and suspicion. They had all heard the story of the Ethel. They knew he was the man who had fixed the unfixable, but they couldn't reconcile that with the humble figure before them. Isabella led him to the primary data hub, a room where floor-to-ceiling screens displayed endless streams of telemetry from the failed Argus drone tests. "This is everything we have," she said. "Flight data, system logs, error codes. They've been over it 1,000 times." Elias didn't look at the overwhelming cascade of numbers. Instead, he asked for something simple. "Can you play me the audio from the drone's internal sensors? The raw vibrational data, just before the failure." Harris scoffed. "We have terabytes of quantitative data. You want to listen to static?" "Humor me," Elias said, his voice even. Isabella nodded to a technician who isolated the audio feed. A low hum filled the room, the sound of the drone's electric motors in flight. It was steady, monotonous. Elias closed his eyes, just as he had done with the Ethel, and listened. For 2 minutes, the sound was unchanged. Then, just seconds before the system log showed the catastrophic failure, it happened. A tiny, almost imperceptible fluctuation in the hum. A sound so faint it was like a single string on a violin being plucked out of tune. "There," Elias said, opening his eyes. "Play that back. The last 3 seconds. Isolate that frequency and amplify it." The technician, intrigued, did as he was told. The sound replayed, this time louder. It was a high-frequency chirp, lasting less than a quarter of a second. It was a digital whisper, utterly alien to the drone's normal operational sounds. "It's a ghost," Elias said softly. "A command packet hidden in a carrier wave. It's not a glitch. It's a message. It's telling the drone's flight controller to do something it wasn't designed to do, to destabilize itself." The entire room was silent. In 2 minutes of listening, he had formed a more coherent theory than they had in 2 months of analysis. He had found the saboteur's signature. "Can you trace it?" Isabella asked, her voice tense. "The sender would have been too smart for that," Elias mused. He would have bounced the signal, masked the origin. But he had to have a way in. A backdoor. For the next 10 hours, Elias worked with her team, not as a consultant, but as a conductor leading an orchestra. He didn't write code or run simulations. He asked questions. He guided their search, directing them away from the complex systems and toward the simplest ones. Look where no one else would bother to look, he told them. Look in the temperature sensor for the landing gear. Look in the diagnostic code for the battery charger. And there, buried in the firmware for a non-critical temperature sensor, they found it, a few lines of elegant, malicious code. It was a Trojan horse, designed to lie dormant until it received that specific high-frequency audio signal. Once triggered, it would issue a single catastrophic command directly to the drone's gyroscopic stabilizers, forcing it into an irrecoverable spin. It was the work of a brilliant, malevolent mind. A wave of relief washed over the room, quickly replaced by a new sense of dread. "We found it," Harris said, his voice full of disbelief and newfound respect for Elias. "We can remove it." "Don't," Elias said sharply. Everyone turned to him. "What do you mean, don't?" Isabella asked. "We have to patch this vulnerability. If you remove the code, he'll know you're onto him," Elias explained. "Marcus Thorne. He'll simply find another way in, or he'll scrub his tracks. Right now, he thinks he's invisible. He thinks his plan is still perfect." Just then, a junior technician's console beeped. "Sir, Ms. Sterling, the server logs from the time of the backdoor's installation. They're gone. Wiped clean." A chill went through the room. Marcus, or someone working for him, had been alerted. Their digital investigation had hit a brick wall. They had found the weapon, but the fingerprints were gone. They had a ghost, but no way to prove who the killer was. This was their first major setback. Marcus was a step ahead of them. Isabella looked defeated. "So we're back to square one. We can fix the drone, but we can't prove it was sabotage." Thorne walks away, and he'll probably still get the contract because our program has been plagued by reliability issues. Elias looked at the drone prototype suspended in the center of the lab. It was a magnificent piece of engineering, sleek and powerful. He walked over to it, running a hand along its fuselage, feeling the cold, smooth composite skin. "Not square one," he said, a new idea beginning to form in his mind. "We've been trying to fight him in his world, the digital world. It's time to make him fight in mine." He looked back at Isabella, a glint in his eye she was coming to recognize. "He gave us a digital ghost. We're going to build a physical one to catch it." The stakes were now impossibly high. The government contract was not just about money. It was the cornerstone of Sterling Dynamics' future. Losing it would trigger a crisis of confidence among investors, leaving the company vulnerable to a hostile takeover. A takeover Marcus Thorne would undoubtedly lead. Time was running out. The final demonstration was just over a week away. "What do you mean, a physical ghost?" Isabella asked, her voice a mix of desperation and hope. "We can't prove where the signal came from," Elias explained, his mind already working, seeing schematics and energy flows. "But we can prove what it does in real time in front of everyone. We need to build a new kind of diagnostic sensor, not a digital one that logs data for later, but a physical one that reacts instantly. Something that can visualize the malicious command as it happens. A canary in a coal mine." He sketched his idea on a whiteboard. It was a radical concept. He proposed creating a small, self-contained device that would be wired directly to the gyroscopic stabilizers. The device would contain a unique, supercooled crystalline gel. Under normal operating conditions, the gel would remain perfectly clear. But when exposed to the specific energy signature of the malicious command, the one he'd identified from the audio frequency, it would trigger an instantaneous phase transition. The gel would flash a brilliant, unmistakable crimson color. "We'll mount it under a transparent plate on the drone's fuselage," Elias finished, his drawing a flurry of confident lines. "When Thorne sends the kill signal, everyone in that room won't see a generic system error on a screen. They'll see the poison entering the machine's veins, live and in color. Harris and the other engineers stared at the whiteboard, astounded. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity and audacity. It was analog proof for a digital crime. But there was a problem. A supercooled crystalline gel that reacts to a specific energy signature? Harris said, shaking his head. That's theoretical material science. It doesn't exist. We couldn't synthesize something like that in a year, let alone a week. Elias smiled faintly. It exists. The formula was part of my work on the Icarus project. It was designed to detect material stress at a quantum level. The research was classified and buried after the accident. He looked at Isabella. I have the formulas in my head, but I can't make it here. He pointed to the state-of-the-art fabrication labs around them. Your labs are too clean, too precise. This requires a different touch. It needs intuition. It needs a forge, a crucible, and tools that have a memory. He looked her directly in the eye. I need to build it in my garage. For the next 5 days, the heart of the multi-billion-dollar Sterling Dynamics operation shifted from its gleaming tower to Elias Vance's humble garage. Isabella had a clean room and advanced equipment transported and installed, but Elias used very little of it. He worked at his old, scarred workbench using his own custom-made tools. He fired up a small, gas-powered forge in the corner, its flames casting a primal glow on the high-tech equipment surrounding it. Isabella spent most of those 5 days there watching him. She saw a transformation. The quiet, reserved mechanic was gone, replaced by a master craftsman in his element. He moved with a focused grace, his grease-stained hands working with materials at a molecular level, his instincts guiding him where a supercomputer would have failed. He was not just an engineer, he was an artist. She saw the passion he had for his work, a passion she had long ago traded for power. Lily would often sit nearby, drawing pictures of her father surrounded by sparks, a hero taming fire. One afternoon, she brought a drawing to Isabella. It was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. A man in greasy overalls, a woman in a pointy dress, and a small girl in the middle. Underneath, she had written, "The Fix-It Family." Isabella felt a lump form in her throat. She, who had built an empire, had never once been considered part of a family. As Elias worked, they talked. He told her about his wife, Sarah, about their shared dream of building things that would make the world better. He told her about the crushing weight of the Icarus cover-up, and how he had walked away to protect the only thing he had left of her, their daughter. Isabella, in turn, found herself opening up in a way she never had before. She spoke of her lonely childhood, of a father who measured his love in stock prices, and of her relationship with Marcus Thorne, a man she had once mistaken for an equal partner, only to realize he saw her as a company to be acquired. In the heat of the forge and the scent of ozone and oil, a bond formed. It was a partnership built on shared purpose and a growing, unspoken respect. They were piecing together more than just a sensor. They were piecing together their own fractured lives. On the 6th day, it was finished. A small, glass vial containing a crystal-clear, shimmering gel. It looked innocuous, beautiful. It was the key to everything. They integrated the sensor into the Argus drone, their teams working seamlessly now under Elias's quiet direction. They tested it. They sent a clean signal to the gyros, and the gel remained clear. Then they replicated the hidden sabotage frequency. The moment the signal hit, the vial flashed with an instantaneous, violent crimson light. It worked perfectly. The full scope of Marcus's plan was now chillingly clear. He would attend the final demonstration. From a hidden device, he would send the kill signal at the most dramatic moment of the drone's flight display. The Argus would tumble from the sky in front of the Department of Defense officials and the world's media. Sterling Dynamics would be ruined publicly and spectacularly. And he would be there, a comforting presence for his distraught ex-fiancée, ready to pick up the pieces. He was not just trying to win a contract, he was orchestrating a public execution. Now, they had the means to turn his own weapon against him. Their plan was set. They would not prevent the attack. They would invite it. They would let him spring his trap, only to find himself the one caught in its jaws. The night before the demonstration, Isabella found Elias in the lab, standing before the completed Argus drone. Her company, her future, rested on the shoulders of this man she had laughed at just weeks ago. "Are you ready for this?" she asked softly. He didn't take his eyes off the drone. "A machine is honest," he said. "It does what it's built to do. It's people you have to watch out for." He finally turned to her. "He's going to fall. Men like him always do. They're overconfident. They think they're the smartest person in any room." "And are they?" she asked. Elias looked at the small, transparent plate on the drone's fuselage, beneath which sat his crimson trap. "Not in this room," he said. The demonstration hall was a cavern of tension and anticipation. High-ranking military officials, stern-faced politicians, and a throng of international press filled the tiered seating, all focused on the gleaming Argus drone resting on a platform in the center of the room. It was the pinnacle of Sterling Dynamics technology, a machine that represented either a brilliant future or a spectacular failure. Isabella Sterling stood at the podium on stage, the embodiment of corporate grace and control. She wore a tailored suit of navy blue, an admiral commanding her flagship. But beneath the calm exterior, her heart hammered against her ribs. Every screen, every camera, every pair of eyes was on her. In the front row, Marcus Thorne sat with a look of feigned support, his expression a carefully crafted mask of encouragement that did nothing to hide the predatory glint in his eyes. He believed this was her final, desperate act before the fall. Backstage, in a cramped and darkened control room, Elias Vance was in his own world. He sat before a single, isolated monitor displaying a raw data feed from the sensor he had built. He wore a simple headset, listening not to the presentation, but to the electronic heartbeat of the drone. He was the guardian, the hidden variable in Marcus's malevolent equation. Lily was safe with a trusted friend, but he had her latest drawing, the Fix-It family, taped to the console in front of him. It was his anchor. "We live in an age of unseen threats," Isabella began, her voice steady and clear, resonating through the auditorium. "Our security depends not just on what we can see, but on what we can anticipate. The Argus is not just a drone. It is a promise of vigilance, of reliability, and of integrity." As she spoke, the drone's rotors began to spin with a low whine. It lifted off the platform, hovering silently in the air, a marvel of stability and grace. It began to execute a series of complex flight maneuvers, a ballet of precision engineering. The audience murmured in appreciation. Marcus watched, a faint, smug smile playing on his lips. The performance was impressive, which would only make the failure more dramatic. "The Argus platform is built on a foundation of trust," Isabella continued, her eyes finding Marcus's in the crowd. "Its systems are protected by the most advanced security protocols ever designed. It is, we believe, incorruptible." This was the cue. In the control room, Elias leaned closer to his screen. He saw Marcus shift in his seat, his hand subtly moving inside his jacket pocket. He was reaching for the transmitter. On stage, Isabella directed the show. "Now, the Argus will demonstrate its most critical capability, sustained, high-G tactical maneuvering." The drone shot upwards, then banked into a sharp, aggressive turn that would have torn a lesser machine apart. It was breathtaking. The audience gasped. Marcus saw his moment. This was the point of maximum stress, the perfect time for a catastrophic structural failure. Elias saw it first. A spike on his monitor. A needle of pure malice in the data stream. "Signal acquired," he said quietly into his microphone. A direct line to the stage manager. He sent it. The signal hit the drone. For a horrifying fraction of a second, the drone shuddered in midair, its rotors stuttering as the malicious code fought for control of its gyroscopes. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Marcus's smile widened. This was it. But then, something else happened. On the drone's fuselage, the small, transparent plate that covered Elias's sensor flashed with an intense, undeniable crimson light. It was a bloody wound appearing on the machine's perfect skin, a visible scream of electronic violation. Simultaneously, A second set of commands, a countermeasure Elias had secretly programmed, took over. Instead of sending the drone into a death spiral, it stabilized the machine. But it did something else, too. It used the energy of Marcus's own signal to triangulate its source, bypassing all his digital cloaking. The attack signal itself became a beacon, pointing back to its master. On the main screen behind Isabella, the flight telemetry was instantly replaced by a new graphic, a schematic of the auditorium. A bright red line shot out from the drone, tracing a path directly to a single seat in the front row, a seat occupied by Marcus Thorne. A pop-up window appeared, displaying the text, "Malicious override signal detected. Source identified." The auditorium erupted in chaos. Marcus Thorne's face went white with shock. He was staring at the screen, his mask of composure shattered, replaced by the naked panic of a man caught in a perfect trap. Isabella's voice cut through the noise, cold and sharp as forged steel. "As I said," she declared, her gaze locked on Marcus, "we live in an age of unseen threats. What you have just witnessed was not a malfunction. It was a deliberate, criminal act of corporate sabotage." She pointed a finger directly at her former fiancé. "And thanks to a new diagnostic system, a system that values truth above all else, we have just seen the saboteur." Security guards converged on Marcus, who was frozen in his seat, his face a mask of disbelief and ruin. The press cameras, which had been focused on the drone, now swiveled, their flashes like a volley of gunfire, capturing his public immolation for the world to see. He had planned an execution, and he had succeeded. It was just his own. Backstage, Elias leaned back in his chair and took a slow, deep breath. He looked at Lily's drawing, the Fix-It family. He had done more than just save a company. He had delivered justice. He had honored the memory of his wife and protected the future for his daughter. The ghost of Project Icarus had finally been laid to rest. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Marcus Thorne was arrested in the auditorium, his reputation and his company irrevocably destroyed by the public evidence of his treachery. The story of the Sterling Dynamics demonstration became an industry legend overnight. News outlets weren't just talking about the drone's performance. They were obsessed with the mysterious crimson sensor and the genius who had invented it. Sterling Dynamics was awarded the Argus contract, a deal larger than they had ever imagined, and their stock price skyrocketed. But the real story was happening far from the glare of the news cameras. Elias Vance found himself at the center of a whirlwind. He was no longer a humble mechanic. He was the grease-stained genius. The mechanic maestro job offers poured in from every major tech and aerospace company in the world, each promising astronomical salaries and state-of-the-art labs. He ignored them all. A week after the demonstration, Isabella came to his garage. It was quiet again, the high-tech equipment gone, leaving only the familiar scent of oil and the comforting presence of his tools. Lily was at school. "They're calling you a hero," Isabella said, her voice soft. She was different now. The hard, calculating edge was gone, replaced by a warmth and a humility he had never thought possible. The crisis had reforged her. "I just fixed a problem," Elias replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "You did more than that," she insisted. "You saved my company. You saved my life's work. And you showed me. You showed me what I had been missing." She took a deep breath. "I don't want to offer you a job, Elias. I want to offer you a partnership. I'm creating a new position at Sterling Dynamics, Chief Innovation Officer. It's yours. You would answer to no one but me." Elias looked around his garage, at this small kingdom of integrity he had built for himself and his daughter. He thought of the corporate world, the world of compromises and greed that had cost him so much. "I'm a mechanic, Isabella," he said quietly. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You are the soul of what this company should have been all along. You are its conscience." She saw the hesitation in his eyes and understood. "We do it on your terms, not mine." And so the negotiation began. It was not about salary or stock options. It was about principles. Elias laid out his conditions. First, he would work no more than 40 hours a week, and he would always be home to have dinner with Lily. Second, his primary lab would not be in the corporate tower. It would be right here, an expanded and upgraded version of his own garage, a place where real work got done. His final condition was the most important. "I want to create a new division," he said. "The Icarus division, its sole purpose will be to vet every project, not for profitability, but for integrity and safety. It will have the power to stop any project at any time for ethical reasons. It will be the company's heart." Isabella didn't even blink. "Done," she said. A genuine, radiant smile spread across her face. "Welcome aboard, partner." In the months that followed, a new chapter began for all of them. Sterling Dynamics flourished under its new philosophy, attracting the brightest and most ethical minds in the industry. The Icarus division became a model for corporate responsibility. But the real transformation was personal. Elias found a new sense of purpose, blending his genius with his values, no longer having to choose between the stars and his daughter. He brought his quiet strength and moral clarity into Isabella's world, and she, in turn, brought her resources and vision to his, helping to establish the Sarah Vance Scholarship for Principled Engineering. Isabella found that the fortress around her heart had not been breached, but willingly dismantled. She started leaving work on time. She learned the joy of a quiet dinner, of listening to a child's stories about her day, of watching a man's hands, once covered in grease, now gently helping that child with her homework. The final scene was not set in a boardroom or a lab. It was a Saturday afternoon in the newly expanded garage, a perfect fusion of old-world tools and new-world technology. Elias stood over a workbench, explaining a set of blueprints to an attentive Lily. Isabella leaned against the doorframe, watching them, a look of profound peace on her face. Lily had drawn a new picture, which was now framed and hanging on the wall. It was the same 3 stick figures, but this time they were inside a spaceship of her own design, flying toward a brightly colored star. She had updated the caption. It no longer said, "The Fix-It family," it just said, "Home." Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever felt that the world saw only your title, your clothes, or the dirt on your hands, and missed the truth of who you are? This story is a reminder that genius is not confined to glass towers, and that integrity is a force more powerful than any corporate strategy. The greatest systems are not built of circuits and steel, but of character, courage, and love. Share this story if you believe that a person's true worth is measured not by their position, but by their principles, and that even in a world obsessed with success, the most important thing we can ever build is a family.